Now on Indianapolis This Week.
Well, you either spend that amount of money or you spend more. Those are the two choices.
He's not running for re-election, but what does Greg Ballard hope to accomplish in his final year as mayor? We talk about his plan for the year ahead and his legacy for the city.
I've instructed Secretary Kerry to immediately begin discussions with Cuba to reestablish diplomatic relations that have been severed since January of 1961.
The historic announcement about Cuba and why some Indiana leaders are calling it the wrong idea.
When you reward bad actors, bad things happen.
RTV6, the Indy Channel. This is Indianapolis This Week with Rafael Sanchez.
Thank you for joining us. We begin this week with the man in charge of Indianapolis heading into his final year on the job. Mayor Greg Ballard says he has two major priorities before he leaves office. Meanwhile, his party has yet to announce who will carry the Republican torch with 5 months from a primary and less than a year from Election Day.
8 years ago this time, nobody knew who I was, right? So anything can happen. But, you know, they're out trying to find the right candidate, and you got to be ready for it. It's a very strong, very personal decision that's going to affect your entire family. So you got to be ready for that, and all that's fine. But I think it's still way early to really get too far down the line, like nothing's happening here. So.
But it's a year, though. I mean, it takes a while to build
but like I say, nobody knew who I was till February, March, right? And even then, 10% of the people, maybe in that time frame. So lots of things could happen. And there, I mean, there are a lot of great candidates. Sure. You just mentioned one, obviously.
Right, but are you involved in the process? Are you?
Yeah, partially, but it's mainly on the party, right? But I'm trying to help them as I can.
So you have a list? Any names on the list you want to share? You don't have to ask.
Jim Merritt would have been a great mayor, no question about that. He's a great guy. He's a great guy. He's been my campaign chair for. Yeah.
Anybody else on that list you want to share with me? I know you
I probably shouldn't. Since you brought him up, I'll say that. But
you know, as the mayor, you could do whatever you want. You could share if you wanted to.
Well, I don't want to put anybody on the spot.
Okay.
So.
Any regrets about not running? You not running?
Not really. I mean, I have a lot of people. You know, we had the Christmas breakfast in here in this room this morning, and I had a lot of people come up to me saying that they're disappointed. There's a lot of that going on. They're disappointed because they like the way the city's going and things like that. But they also say we understand. So it's closely followed by we understand and wish you the best of luck.
So we will not see your name then on the ballot. That you've made a decision that you will not go back on. That you had Mrs. Ballard.
You won't see it on the ballot for mayor in 2015. That's true.
Okay. Let's talk about 2014. Okay. Jam-packed, a lot going on, a lot to be proud of. I know you hate to put things into 1, 2, or 3s, but
I do.
What, right? And I know that, but I'm going to still ask you the question. Yeah. What were your top 3 achievements in 2014? Of all the things you did, what will you look back and say, you know what, I'm really proud of those 3 things?
You know, there's a few things you can look back at. You know, recycling and the Cummins announcements, but one thing I'll talk about here in a second is about infrastructure. But I think 14 was also the year when the people in the city started realizing this city is really going in the right direction. There's a lot of good things happening, and there's more of a sense of that in the city, and there's a sense of optimism and a sense of future to the city. I'm very, very proud of that. I really am. But again, you can go down the line about getting pre-K to where it is. You can get Cummins. I mean, you can just go down that list. The recycling, all of that. But the thing that people should be talking about, they won't, but they should be, is the stormwater adjustment into the future. So that will allow future mayors and councilors really the ability to address those issues underground that we have not been able to address. Really to the standard we should have, that we wanted to. So it takes the money from $2 to $3 million a year, which is scraping by, actually going negative on keeping up with the repairs that are needed, to $17 million.
2015, you talked to me about that. You're going to still be bold. You're going to be on the job. There are things you want to get done. So what does that look like in your last year? Obviously, you're not going to be a lame duck. You have an agenda that you want to.
2 musts right off the bat is the completion of the pre-K. We need the funding vote from the council, and also the Justice Center. The Justice Center is one of those things that's been kicked down the road for at least 20 years, maybe 30 years. People couldn't get it done. They just couldn't figure out a way to get it done, either politically or financially. We think we've got a great model for it. I think it works. Both sides of the aisle know it has to be done. And so I'm hoping that we get this thing done. That would, again, one of those things that will set the city up for a long time into the future, because how we do it now is inherently unsafe. I mean, it was just a coincidence, but you know, there was a prisoner who escaped the day before we made the winning bid announcement, right? He was on the second floor of this building running around scaring people and hiding. That's what we've been doing, and I walk by prisoners 3 to 4 times a week in the city, and you know, it's what we've been doing for the last few years is inherently unsafe. It costs a lot of money to go from this spot to this spot to this spot to this spot. But we have it all in one place, in a safe place together, with the courts and the arresting processing center and the medical and the jails and all that all in one place. Much, much better, and we think we could do it at a cheaper rate than we're doing it right now.
You were able to get a bipartisan group to stand with you to support the Justice Center, but you still have critics who say, look, you're going to spend how much money on this when we still have not been able to have the full funding for police? How do you answer that?
Well, you either spend that amount of money or you spend more. Those are the two choices. That's what it is. You're going to spend the money anyway, but you're going to spend more of it than what it looks like to us if you don't get the Justice Center. So, I mean, you're still going to have the jails. You're still going to have the Sheriff's Department do all this transportation. You're still going to have all the medical facility. You're going to have all this anyway. You're going to pay for it anyway. Let's be efficient about it and do it in a different place that puts all these pieces together in a much safer manner and so in a more efficient manner. That's all we're doing, because we pay rent all over the place in this city, right? And the courts, 37 courts in a place designed for 16. I mean, you're going to pay for it anyway. They're saying it's this amount of money, like it's an addition. No, it's not an addition. It's a replacement, is what it is. And the money that we think we need to replace it would be less than what you would spend anyway.
Do you know where you want to be a year from now after you do walk away and say, job well done, or, you know, I've done my job?
Well, I certainly want to go to the end here. All that said, people have been talking to me on you know, some off time. It's a little bit humbling, frankly. So we'll see where it goes. There are other opportunities, not just in the city, but other places. All that said, I want to stay in the city.
Sure.
I grew up here. I brought when I got out of the Marine Corps from Germany, I came here because I wanted my kids to call Indianapolis their hometown.
Sure.
I mean, I love the place, obviously. So I'm hoping I'll be able to stay here. But we'll see. We'll see where it all goes. One of the things, most brilliant things that one of the former mayors told me is, you know, all of the above is a good answer too.
The mayor says he may also consider writing a book in the future. As he said, when it comes to options, he may say all of the above. Coming up, the president's historic change of course on Cuba. A top Republican lawmaker from Indiana talks about why the new policy, in his words, is a bad idea. Next on Indianapolis This Week. Welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. We now turn to the president's historic announcement this week, the plan to normalize U.S. relations with Cuba. In that announcement Wednesday, the president says the United States will open an embassy in Cuba for the first time in more than 50 years. He has also ordered some economic sanctions to be eased and plans to ask Congress to lift the embargo that has been in place since 1961.
I believe that we can do more to support the Cuban people and promote our values through engagement. After all, these 50 years have shown that isolation has not worked. It's time for a new approach.
The president's announcement has brought immediate criticism from some Republican members of Congress, including Indiana's very own Luke Messer. Congressman, welcome to the program. Let's start with some developing news. And of course, the president easing some travel restrictions with Cuba and also wanting to resume diplomatic relationships with the Cuban leadership. Are you okay with that?
Well, the announcement came on the heels of the release of Alan Gross, who was a humanitarian wrongfully imprisoned in Cuba. Of course, we're happy to see Mr. Gross released, but I'm troubled by the president's announcement. You know, for more than 50 years, presidents of both parties have stood strong against the Castro brothers, recognizing that communism is not the answer and that we ought not reward their human rights abuses and, frankly, thuggery. The release of Mr. Gross doesn't change that simple fact. I believe we need to continue sanctions against Cuba until they start to treat their people with basic human dignity.
But 50 years later, the policy has not worked. So at what point do you try something new? And is this the wrong thing to try, in your opinion, then? Because for 50 years, right, nothing has changed. Cuba has been in doing their own thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think history shows that when you reward bad actors, bad things happen. The time to reward Cuba is when the policy in that country starts to change. It's in terribly impoverished place. Communism isn't working there. It's time they treat their people with dignity and open up their economic system.
Last question on this issue. The president says he'll come to Congress and ask for the lifting of sanctions. I take it, Congressman, that you will not be voting to support the president on the lifting of sanctions?
I will not support the lifting of sanctions on Cuba until they start to change their policy.
When you get back to work in January, what will be the priority of the GOP? You will be entering a new cycle, both controlling the House and the Senate. You're the 5th highest ranking member of the House, but what will that agenda look like in 2015?
Well, I mean, it's an exciting opportunity to be elected policy chair of the conference. Of course, I know the only way that I have that opportunity is because the 700,000 people I represent here in Indiana have elected to send me there. I think for our conference, we need to be demonstrating what we're for and not be just defined by what we're against. We've got to start to deliver for the American people who are concerned about this economy. They want to see more good-paying jobs. They want to see health care they can afford. They want to see energy policy that makes their energy costs more affordable. I hope we'll come out of the gate with some common sense policies, like, for example, supporting the building of the Keystone Pipeline. That's something we ought to get done right away in January. There's a broad cross-section of bipartisan support for that. I think we need common sense fixes on the president's health care law, issues like restoring the 40-hour work week.
So for you, the first, if I can narrow it down.
Yeah, please.
First 100 days for you, if you had to pick 3 things that you'd like to at least see, obviously there are many more members of Congress. You don't control the entire body, nor the Senate, but what would you like to at least see as a starting off point that you can then be held accountable for that first 100 days or that first 6 months?
Well, it needs to be focused on jobs in the economy. So first, again, I think affordable energy, the Keystone Pipeline would be an example of that. One of the biggest driver of costs for family are energy costs. The Keystone Pipeline would help that. Another big driver of costs for families is health care, and we need to be for common sense policies that help reduce costs there. With some things we can do, like allowing competition across state lines and restoring the option for people to purchase the health care insurance that they think is best for them. Then I think we need to continue to pass budgets that don't spend more than we take in. That's good for our economy too. And look at tax reform that is probably our best chance from a policy perspective to recreate what Ronald Reagan did in the 1980s. We could lower rates for everybody, close all kinds of special interest loopholes, and make a difference for this economy.
On the health care issue, will it be a repeal issue or will it be a modify issue?
I think it's going to be a little bit of both. I mean, frankly, with this president in charge, it's not likely he's going to sign repeal. I think repeal is the right policy for our country. I think you'll see us working on that in Congress. To repeal it, though, we're going to have to be able to demonstrate what our alternative plan is, making sure that we have a plan that works and is affordable for working Americans, and then also looking at the common sense fixes that we could work on, like Todd Young's 40-hour work week restoration, or getting rid of the individual mandate, or getting rid of the medical device tax that would make a big difference for Eli Lilly and others.
We have 30 seconds. The budget, $1.1 trillion. I don't even know what that looks like.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
But it was passed. Will that be enough, or will there be any more spending beyond the $1.1 trillion?
Well, $1.1 trillion is the budget that gets us through next year. You know, it wasn't a perfect bill, but it was better than all alternatives. It kept the government open, and it gives us an opportunity in January and February to have a debate on the president's immigration executive orders that, frankly, I don't agree with, and we were able to preserve all of that in this budget bill.
Congressman, thank you so much for coming. You are welcome anytime.
Thanks, Rafael.
Happy New Year to you.
You too.
Thank you, sir. Coming up, our political insiders weigh in on the president's announcement, plus the interview that you won't see or hear, and the hacking that's put that movie on hold. Welcome back to Indianapolis this week as we bring in our political insiders. You know Abdul Hakim Shabazz with IndyPolitics.org, and I will welcome to the roundtable for the first time Dan Parker, former Indiana Democratic Party chairman. Welcome to the program. Let's talk about Cuba. We have embassies in some of the worst countries in the world: Russia, China. Why not Cuba?
My thing is, why not? I mean, it's been 50 years. Most of us weren't even born, when the embargo went into effect. Fidel Castro, the policy hasn't worked. The man outlived like 8 American presidents. And while I don't agree with the president a lot, this makes absolute perfect sense. You want to win people over with democracy and freedom and liberty, you engage them, you don't close down doors.
Not only should you do that, but we should engage them economically as well. What can change Cuba more than anything is American commerce. And so I applaud the president for taking this bold step. And I think there's a lot of issues that can be looked at. I think the most interesting part of this whole deal was the influence of Pope Francis in this entire thing.
Will the embargo be lifted?
That depends upon Congress, because only Congress can actually lift.
It's a Republican Congress.
Yeah, only Congress can lift the embargo. I mean, we heard Luke Messer, earlier about, it's a bad idea.
Yes or no? Yes or no?
Probably not.
Eventually.
Eventually in our lifetime, or eventually until 2016?
Given the fact that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce came out very strongly in favor of lifting the embargo, I think eventually it will happen. Probably not this year.
Another story dominating the news cycle this week, of course, that being Sony Pictures canceling the premiere of the movie The Interview because of threats from hackers connected to North Korea. I talked with Senator Dan Coates, who says this points out the danger that the U.S. faces from cyber criminals.
Well, we haven't lost the war, but we've lost the first battle. This is a serious threat to the United States, not just for motion pictures, but if terrorists or others can hack into our critical infrastructure, electric grid, banking, finance, a number of other things, it can do serious harm to the United States. And it rises to the level of an assault, but it's just over the airwaves instead of on the ground.
Dad, we won't be seeing this movie come Christmas Day, so what's next? What other country will stifle American free speech if they don't like what we're producing?
Who knows? But I think that this is a wake-up call for most American businesses. If it can happen to Sony, it can happen to somebody else, and it's intellectual property. And I think it's unfortunate that the movie didn't go forward in premiere. You can't give into things like this.
What should the U.S. do then?
I only wish they would have done it for the next Tyler Perry film that's going to come out, to keep a movie off the screen. No, I mean, no, it does bring up issues of cybersecurity. That's something that a lot of people have been talking about. Is that in the war on terror, whether it's not just armies and troops, but it's also making sure our cyber infrastructure is protected. However, the one thing that I will give Sony a little bit of credit for is if they were to go forward with the movie and something were to happen, they're setting themselves up for tons of litigation down the road. So
what do we do to North Korea, though? I mean, we don't talk to the country. They did give us some American hostages back a couple of weeks ago. What do we do with a country that wants to do us harm?
Well, it's tough because there's so many sanctions on it now because of its nuclear program. So it's really going to have to be engaging China to deal with this problem.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but he's absolutely right. The Chinese are the only ones that can have some influence on North Koreans, and so dealing with the Chinese is the only way you're going to get those guys under control.
So you're going to agree with him on this one. You also agree with him on the budget, where we just got the final numbers that came in. The state will not meet its projections, much less money coming in than expected, more than $100 million. Where does the governor start slashing?
Well, the governor doesn't have to slash, because here's why. Although the revenue was brought down for 2015, revenue is still growing in 2016 and in 2017. And because they held back money, those things called reversions that we've talked about before on this program, there won't have to be any more budget cuts. And there actually is more money, for education. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to prioritize. The good news is we've got more money. The bad news is we don't have as much of it as we thought, so we just have to keep our priorities in place.
So, Dan, is the governor's decision on this about him being governor or about him being president? Or running for president, I should say.
Because we are required to have a balanced budget, this is much more about being governor. But, I mean, I think that the thing that's going to have to be slashed is some talking points, because we're not growing as much as the talking points say coming out of the State House. And we really need to take a look at all avenues here. Things are going to have to be looked at, and there's not as much money out there to increase the things everybody wants to do. I have to disagree
with my good Democratic friend here. We're growing at the same rate as the national government. Sat through a revenue forecast for 3 hours this past week. Our rate of growth is the exact same at the national level. Actually, we're doing a little bit better than the national economy.
So you're proud of the president's budget then? Because usually you're against the president's budget, and you're saying that if the president's budget is
if it's good enough for Barack Obama, it should be good enough for Mike Pence, which means it should be good enough for Dan Parker.
He put the blue tie on, and now all of a sudden he's agreeing with the president on everything.
Hey, we're both from Chicago.
The reality is that the talking points coming from the governor's office has been about how the amazing growth in Indiana.
Sure.
It's not happening on income tax collections. And you know, gaming's going backwards, cigarette tax is going backwards, so you know things are going to have to be adjusted.
You do get the last one.
Yeah, but there's, first of all, in gaming, there's a lot more competition than Indiana's had at any point in time. With respect to income taxes, we have about 500,000. We have thousands of jobs in the state that are going unfilled because people do not have the skill set to fill them. When those jobs aren't filled, people aren't working. They're not paying income taxes. So that's where we need to focus our energy on.
Will the governor push another tax cut?
No. Tax simplification, yes. Tax cut, no.
Will he have support in the legislature if he does?
Is tax simplification a code word for a tax cut? What does that mean in English?
No, by simplifying the tax code, you get better compliance. By better compliance, you get more revenue.
We have a flat tax already.
Hey, thank you for being nice to the new guy this week.
I haze him next week.
The conversation between our insiders continues on Twitter. Check out their Twitter handles. Give us your opinion and stay up to date with Jennifer, Dan, Mary Beth, Abdul, and all of our crew throughout the week. Indianapolis This Week continues right after the break. Thank you for joining us for Indianapolis This Week. Our Storm Team 6 meteorologists will continue to track the weather and a possible snowstorm this week to see how it will affect your travel and if we'll have a white Christmas. Next Sunday, we'll be right here once again, looking ahead to the biggest stories of 2015. From all of us here at RTV6, we wish you and your families a very happy and safe holidays. Remember that we are always on the RTV6 app and our website, theindychannel.com. Go Colts on this Sunday afternoon.